Welcome back. I think we're just ending one of the other breakout sessions. I was on the ethical investing. Um, and I know that our vapes are trash, which I will have to watch now in the recorded session. I think that is just ending. So I'm Meredith Berkman, and I am a co-founder of Parents Against Vaping, and I am so excited for this next session with two great speakers who are wonderful partners and friends. The discussion will be really what we've been talking about all through, but just targeted, and that is the federal regulatory update, e-cigarettes, menthol, and the future of flavored tobacco products. And I'm so happy to be having this conversation with Joelle Lester, who is Director of Commercial Tobacco Control Programs at the Public Health Law Center, wonderful partner, and also fantastic partner and friend. And I'm proud to say, not only, as it says on the slide, a PAVE advisory board member, but now a PAVE board member, for which we're very grateful. And that is Carol Magruder, who is co-chair and a co-founder of the African American Tobacco Control Leadership Council, the AATCLC. So thank you both so much for joining us and for having this really important conversation. Really great to see both of you. Hi, Carol. Hi, Joelle.
Hi, Meredith. Good to be here.
Thanks. So I want to start with Carol for reasons that will be obvious, if not already. And that is, Carol, there's the good news, bad news about everything, including FDA. And so I want to start with the really exciting and historic news. And that is FDA's recent announcement of an end, which is not going to come soon enough, which we'll get into, but an end to the sale of all menthol cigarettes. And I want to first say thank you, and thank you to you and to your fellow co-founders of AATCLC. Right, exactly. I'm sure there are people virtually clapping at the screens. I'm sure. Phil Gardner and Dr. Valerie Yerger. And I'll very briefly just say that all of us who care about this issue, who care about tobacco control, who care about protecting children from generational nicotine addiction and the targeting of priority populations, in this case, decades of targeting of African-American smokers by the tobacco industry after 2009, when flavored cigarettes, but for menthol, were taken off the market. But without your commitment and relentless, tireless advocacy, this would never have happened. So I just want to say from the bottom of my heart, from all of us, thank you. It's incredibly inspiring and will have great meaning for the future of public health for generations to come. So you don't have to answer because I know you're very humble, but anyway, and maybe you could, very briefly, because I know Joelle, you also for years have been working on this. It's a long story, but maybe Carol, I'll let you just sort of very briefly give the backstory, of how and why it took so long, and then why this is so historic and what this means.
Sure. So I want to make sure that you can hear me. I'm
Yes.
outside. As soon as this starts, there's a gale wind that's come up. But anyway, we will continue. Yes.
It looks lovely, by the way. It looks very refreshing. Don't worry.
Okay. All right. All right. I've been watching, and it's just been wonderful. And it's a tribute to the work of PAVE and how you all just dug in and have made so much happen in such a short time. So with menthol, it's been a long slog, and I want to say with you all because, we had a victory, but it really wasn't with e-cigarettes. With some of the legislation, it's still just as bad, and we're still fighting this fight. Menthol, it's been decades and decades of the pernicious in the African American community, which is how our group, the African American Tobacco Control Leadership, actually came about. The year after that was when President Obama signed the Control Act. So we've been waiting since that time for the nominee, and we know that when they say they're going to do something, and perhaps say, I believe that there are many people in the FDA who do want to do the right thing, but there are just so many forces with the tobacco industry having so much money and so many resources. There's so much against us. So with our lawsuit that we initiated in 2020, 3 steps along the way. And so this is the thing, is that as you're doing this work, those little steps count. So one of the biggest steps, which was the citizens petition that was out with Joelle Lester and her camp, Public Health Law Center, and so sometimes when you think nothing is happening, something has to fight. So the lawsuit that we filed, which was in 2020, which was us and the American Medical Association and the National Medical Association, that lawsuit then prompted the FDA to reach back and respond to the citizens petition, not actually to our lawsuit. But that was the impetus. And so that is a demonstration of how all things work together for our good, and so we keep going. And so this lawsuit, the FDA has declared in the making process to take characterizing flavor along with little cigars and cigarillos, which don't get as much attention as menthol, which is obviously very bad for our young people in particular. And there's in e-cigarettes and cannabis and the little cigars and cigarillos. So we are enthused that this process begins, and it's the beginning of the end, not the end. And so it requires vigilance on all of our parts. It requires following the lead, and Joelle's going to give us some marching orders to have those public comments, to weigh in on the process, and to be vigilant over the process every step of the way, because the tobacco industry will never neither, and neither will we. And so with that, I'll back over to you, Meredith.
Thank you, Carol. Well, I think, as you said so well, it's the beginning of the end, not the end, and it requires vigilance. And actually, there were some conversations yesterday about litigation. We were talking about state litigation and the industry using litigation in a conversation with one of Joelle's colleagues, Mark Meany, and with Del Monte Jefferson, one of your, of course, colleagues as well, and partners. The industry uses litigation to slow things down, and there was a reference to more delay now coming from FDA on the graphic warning labels, which was approved, years ago. So the FDA's historic announcement did say that the menthol, the end to sale of menthol cigarettes wouldn't take place till 2023, which, by the way, is, it should have taken place years ago. But so I guess, Joelle, maybe you could, as Carol said, read us our marching orders. We're talking about the federal issue. So in terms of timing, I also want to say, is it also even more timely and urgent to continue advocating on the state and local level, because we don't want to wait till 2023? And do we think that there will be litigation that could slow down that deadline as well?
Yes, there's a lot there. So just quickly, there's other ways that there could be slowdown here. So the FDA proposed a rule, and now there's a public comment period. The FDA announced it would be for 60 days, which is the minimum required under law for this type of rule. And already
is the deadline for comment.
Is the deadline, and already there are requests from tobacco industry actors for extensions to the public comment period. Never mind the fact that over the last 13 years, there have been 3 other public dockets for people to submit comments on the issue of menthol in cigarettes. So there's been plenty of opportunity for folks to submit their information, and the FDA has had a lot of opportunity to study that information and process it. So there shouldn't be an extension to the public commenting docket. That said, we know the industry will participate in that public comment process, and so must we. And so we have information on our website to help you figure out how to draft a comment, what the important things are to comment in the proposed rules. As Carol said, it's important that there's 2 rules here, one on menthol cigarettes and one prohibiting all flavors, including menthol, in all cigars. So I'll drop those links in the chat, and we're available to help folks who want to do that. Once the docket closes, the agency has basically unlimited time to consider the comments on the docket and then make any changes to the proposed rule and publish a final rule. In the past, that has taken as long as 2 years with the deeming rule, which was proposed in May of 2014 and wasn't finalized until May of 2016. We absolutely hope the FDA acts much more quickly to review and respond to comments on this docket. Again, they've had some practice in this area and get to a final rule publication. They're also proposing that if the rule would become effective 1 year after the publication of the final rule. That's the standard set in the law, but they can deviate downward. They could make that shorter if it's in the interest of public health, which it absolutely is. Folks are becoming
I just want to ask you a question. So you're saying that means a year after 2023, if the use of the term 2023 means that they will release the final rule then, or is that a reference to it would go into effect? So you're saying it would be a 2024 potentially?
I believe they're saying that they project the implementation date to be 2023.
Okay.
But it depends how long they take in reviewing the rules, because they're saying it would be a year from the publication of the final rule. But I'm just saying there's no reason to wait that long. They have an excellent case for a shorter time period. When the Tobacco Control Act prohibited other flavors in cigarettes, they only gave 3 months for the companies to stop manufacturing those products and get them off the shelves. And so we absolutely could have a tighter timeline here. And as Carol and the team at AATCLC have shown us all, the generational addiction and cycles of illness and disability and death caused by menthol cigarettes are happening every day, and they don't have to happen every day. And so the agency should move quickly to get the rule not just finalized, but implemented and enforced. And then on the litigation question, yes, I think we can all count on some tobacco industry litigation. There's a lot of pending litigation against state and local policies around the country, mostly local policies, because locals lead the way. And I think we can expect the same against especially the menthol cigarette regulation, but certainly the cigars as well. That doesn't mean it's going to be a delay like the graphic health warning litigation has caused. It's a different, there are different legal issues at play here, and a First Amendment challenge, which is what is holding up the graphic health warnings, is a pretty high bar to clear for the government, even though we know those will be effective life-saving warnings. But it does, there were a lot of lawsuits against the deeming rule, but that did take effect. And that is our hope for the menthol cigarette rule as well. But yes, we're going to have litigation. Those of us who are public health lawyers are gearing up and preparing. We have been supporting the locals and defending their policies all along the way, and we'll continue to do that for the FDA as well.
There's one thing I just want to follow up. You said that in 2009, when all flavored cigarettes but menthol, which was, let's call it the original sin in this case, right? That there were only 3 months allowed for those products to clear off the market. So is it the same legal principle that the federal government could collapse the time frame and say that all menthol cigarettes should be off much sooner than 2023?
Congress is not governed by the same rules as the agency in terms of the timing for rulemaking processes. So they had the ability to just decide it was going to be 3 months, but the FDA could make the case that a parallel time period is appropriate for the protection of public health, which is the standard that should guide their decision-making here. I do just want to respond to your last question though, because it turns it kind of back to Carol. The state and local policy change activity must not stop. That the FDA is doing the right thing now, and we support them and we're going to engage with them, but communities can act now to protect health. They don't have to wait for the rulemaking process to end. They don't have to wait for the litigation process to end. They can act now. And that is what Carol's team has been doing, and the Center for Black Health and Equity, in supporting this policy change all around the country. And so communities should absolutely continue robust policy change in this area all along the way. That will actually just get their communities ready for effective implementation and enforcement of the federal rule.
I guess you could also say, Carol, couldn't you, that the message is, if the federal government has been so clear in its regulation, right? If you read it, just of how dangerous menthol is, in this case, for cigarettes, and we'll get in a little later why the same doesn't apply for e-cigarettes, because based on their own science, it should. Doesn't that mean that since they have already made it so clear, this counterproductive for the protection of public health, then it's never been more obvious, urgent, and timely for the states and the localities who can act more quickly to
Yes.
work on that, not to wait, because we all know
Yes.
the federal government
Yes,
takes
that is right. That
Okay.
is correct, and we encourage people to keep going locally. And the state of California actually passed a statewide law, Senate Bill 793, which was passed and signed into law, and the tobacco industry promptly collected signatures. So that will be on the ballot in November of this year in California. So this is one of the biggest fights to keep the state of California and to have our law respected that was passed and signed by our governor. And so we're available, the African American Tobacco Control Leadership Council, as is the Center for Black Health and Equity. We are available. We've been Zooming all over this country to help local municipalities to enact legislation to protect their children. And so we want to keep that going. And I just wanted to say one thing. I watched the session on punishing our children about these e-cigarettes. And I really want to echo the comments that were made on that panel. I found them to be very powerful. We're the people that need to be punished, are the adults who let this happen, not our children. We need to be punished because we let this happen, and now we want them to be the adults and to make a healthy choice when we did this or let this happen. And that when we don't have compassionate and equitable tobacco control enforcement, that hurts our movement, because the tobacco industry has used their racialized profiling of our community now to flip it and say that taking menthol off the market is actually going to harm Black people, and that the police are going to start killing us all over this country because of these mentholated tobacco products. So we've lost 1 million Black people in the past 20 years from mentholated tobacco products. We want these products off the market, and we want, this is not about individual enforcement as far as adults is concerned, but that, starting with the schools with our children, that we need to find creative ways to help them and have compassion to help them to get off these products and not to use these products, and not to approach it as that they are just being disobedient and getting back at the adults. So that's very important, and that trickles up to the adult world.
Right. Well, I realize I'm horrified to realize we've been having such a great conversation that we're going to run out of time. So I'm going to skip over the synthetic nicotine, because I know we'll be discussing that in another session, but that obviously, thanks to Congress, came under regulation now by FDA, although that's going to drag on for some time, at least through July, when we see if they make rulings, FDA, on the PMTAs. I believe Puff Bar, in fact, the biggest seller to kids, I believe that they did file a PMTA, but we'll get to that later. I want to get down into menthol, and I referenced this earlier. We've been very, very clear about menthol cigarettes, and we're just thrilled about that, but we don't have time to waste. We need to make it happen on the ground now instead of waiting. In FDA's own ruling, they were so clear in their science and about following the science about menthol, and that menthol is an amplifier of addiction, and that menthol is an initiator for youth. Now, in terms of e-cigarettes, we know this because menthol is among the most popular flavors used by the millions of teens that are regularly vaping. So why is it that FDA, in all of their approvals of tobacco flavored e-cigarettes like Views and some of the others, they've gone out of my head, the tobacco flavor, which we are not as a group advocating about, we're about the flavors. Why do they keep putting menthol to the side when the science that they so clearly lay out in their own regulation has nothing to do with combustion? It's just about menthol. So why is it that they are putting to the side, setting aside menthol? Shouldn't menthol e-cigarettes be taken off the market for the same reason that we know menthol is so harmful in cigarettes? So maybe Joelle, I'll start with you, and then Carol, go to you.
That's a great question, Meredith. I think that what Carol and I have learned over the last 13 years of waiting for the FDA to act on menthol cigarettes is that having the evidence and the authority to act does not translate into action at the FDA, that there's a lot of politics at play. And it seems to me, based on the FDA's public statements about what they view as sort of the spectrum of harm of nicotine products, that they are still reserving the possibility that menthol and e-cigarettes will be an off-ramp for addicted adult cigarette smokers. That has not been demonstrated, and it could be. And what I think the problem here, in my view, of how the FDA is approaching this is that the Tobacco Control Act was set up to be a protective posture towards this product and this market. And so the default should be getting products off the market until you can show that they don't add any new harm, including the problem of attracting and addicting young users. Or that they have some sort of, reduced harm or cessation benefit. So I think the FDA is making a mistake here in not getting those products off the market with this rulemaking. You can submit your comments to that effect to the FDA, but because they don't include e-cigarettes in the proposed rule, it is extremely unlikely they would be able to add them now. They do mention the possibility of menthol flavored hookah and pipe tobacco being commented on and possibly being added to the rule, but not e-cigarettes. But that doesn't, so all this means, I guess, is that we have to continue the fight, as Carol said, and continue the persistent, relentless focus on the goal of protecting health. The FDA has the authority to act. They have a ton of evidence. The thing about menthol is they've had the evidence to get menthol cigarettes off the market since 2009. All this gathering of evidence wasn't really a science problem. It was a political problem for menthol cigarettes. So that may also be true now. And as you said, they've included so much information about how menthol operates in tobacco products to facilitate initiation and deepen addiction. So it just means that the fight continues.
So Carol, I'm going to turn to you and then we'll wrap it up again. FDA's own regulations make the case.
Okay, yes. And I just want to add one thing before we run out of time, is that the attorney generals that are suing Juul, they have the opportunity to make them take off the Juul menthol. North Carolina, I don't know why they did not do this. North Carolina settled with Juul already, and they left Juul menthol e-cigarettes on the market. But the other attorney generals are still negotiating. And one of the provisions is that if any of the other states get something better than North Carolina got, then North Carolina would also get that too. So I just really want to encourage the attorney generals who are still in litigation with Juul to make them take off menthol e-cigarettes off of the market as they negotiate the settlements that are already coming. And African Americans, we're still waiting for our settlement for menthol. And I know that's coming one day, but we're waiting for our settlement to fund our Center for Black Health and Equity and have it be the stellar organization, which it already is, but bigger and more magnificent to help African Americans to improve their health in this country and to get rid of our disparities.
Right. Well, no, and as I said, we had Del Monte, the executive, Del Monte Jefferson, the executive director of that group on yesterday. Well, I'm sorry that there was so much I wanted to talk about, but I think the keys we got to, which is the keys are, we're thrilled and grateful, Carol, for your work and the work of your colleagues, and Joelle for your work and the work of your colleagues on menthol cigarettes. But we have more to go, because menthol e-cigarettes, for all of the reasons, many of the reasons, but certainly the science that FDA has laid out on its own, those products should be taken off the market, and they can be taken off the market immediately under FDA's discretion, right? Regulatory discretion, even if just now, so that we don't have to wait till 2023, since they just said they weren't going to finish the process till then. So Joelle Lester and Carol Magruder, it's such a pleasure to see you. I know we'll be speaking soon, and I want to thank you for your partnership, your support, and all of your hard work. Thank you for joining us today.
Thank you, Paige. You're doing outstanding work. Thank you for all that you do. Thank you.
Thank you.